Janatan Sayeh is a research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he joins us now. Janatan, welcome. So this plan it calls for the IDF to pull out of Gaza in phases, and the White House, it released this image of what that could look like. You know, we've seen terms like this before. Janatan, how realistic is this proposal, and do you see Hamas accepting it?
With the current plan, two main components really stand out. One is the fact that it's going to be beyond just a bilateral or even a trilateral plan. There's going to be a consortium of regional allies and the international community actually stepping in and trying to contribute to solving the problem. So that's one angle that really stands out, to ensure that if a deal is reached, it is in fact sustainable in the long term, and it has the approval of our regional allies. But in addition to that, another key component of the plan is the fact that it envisions a long-term strategy. So from an economic angle and from an investment perspective, it is very crucial for this plan to actually ensure that they can obtain the funds needed for a long-term prosperous Gaza. And both of these things are really standing out in the current proposal.
Do you think it's at all palatable for Hamas?
The issue with Hamas has always been, from their perspective, they elevated the concern that if they were to give up all the hostages, there's no guarantee in place that would prevent another Israeli attack. But this plan, in fact, does put that in place. So Hamas technically does have the guarantees that they want, that they're, number one, their leaders can leave Gaza, and there's going to be no massive population or demographic change in Gaza. So from that perspective, all their concerns should have been met. Now, whether Hamas actually will give in, given the totalitarian nature and the terrorist nature of the group, that remains to be seen. But on paper, at least, their concerns have been met by this proposal.
So we mentioned the International Board of Peace that would be led by President Trump. Janatan, what do you see as the pros and cons of that setup?
Ultimately, the cons continue to be the fact that Hamas does have majority control over the region, specifically in parts of Gaza. So being able to effectively really counter them and give them enough incentive to actually comply with the plan would be the long-term challenge that has always been present and persisted when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. But on the other hand, looking at it, it is very valuable to actually leverage other Palestinian groups, such as the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank, and actually ensure that they do abide by the framework that's needed for them to actually take over Gaza and help with both management when it comes to the police force and, if needed, a military.
You know, all of this comes, of course, as more countries recognize Palestinian statehood, and this plan, it holds out the possibility of a future state. Jonathan, how significant is this moment, and does this plan actually move Palestinians closer to statehood?
It certainly does. The ball is really in Hamas's court, as it has been. But the game changer here is the compromise that is really proposed by this plan in this context. Neighboring countries, especially with the younger generation, increasingly would like to normalize ties with Israel, as we've seen, especially around the Persian Gulf nations, that many of them are U.S. allies. So really the appetite is there, and the only roadblock to further normalization between Israel and our other allies in the region is to ensure that Hamas no longer has a role. And in order to do that, this plan actually does propose guarantees and compromises that would, in paper at least, facilitate that.
Yeah, so President Trump, he sees this Gaza deal as just the beginning of it, and he's looking at expanding the Abraham Accords and ultimately peace in the Middle East. What do you make of that, Jonathan, and how crucial is a Gaza ceasefire to wider peace in the region?
It is very crucial, but ultimately when we talk about instability in the region, we have to trail back to see where the source of the issue is. So when we talk about Hamas, Hezbollah, Iraqi terrorist groups that target U.S. personnel, they're all funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. So ultimately, if we really want to have a stable, prosperous Middle East, we have to ensure that the #1 sponsor of terrorism, which is the regime in Tehran at this point in time, is not able to fund all these proxies. And the maximum pressure campaign, to an extent, has obtained that. But so long as this system of governance is allowed to hold power inside Iran, unfortunately, these issues will only be postponed and never fully addressed. But in the short term, we have to tackle one problem at a time. And in order to really deal with Gaza, this proposal does meet the short-term requirements.
Okay, Janatan Sayeh with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Great to have you on this evening. Thank you.